Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So in this Friday's album review, I'm reviewing the 12th studio album from Melodeth Masters Soilwork and their release Övergivenheten, which was released today via Nuclear Blast. And the album is 14 tracks and an hour and 6 minutes in length. And I hope I pronounced the album title correctly, but apologies if not. So in the current lineup of the band, we have Bjorn Speed Strid on vocals, as has been the case since the start of the band. Sven Karlsson on keyboard, Sylvain Couture and David Andersson on guitars. We also have Bastian Tisgaard on drums and Rasmus Enborn on the bass guitar. Now to move on to my general thoughts and feelings of this latest Soilwork release, and I'm very pleased to say I think this is my favourite album from Soilwork going back to The Living Infinite. It certainly had songs which reminded me very much of the style and the structure of tracks that we had on that particular album, but what I liked a little bit more perhaps about this release from Soilwork was it felt focused, and it also felt like as you go from track to track, it doesn't feel at all disjointed. They flow into another one and another very well. And so the album doesn't feel jarring at any points. It actually feels like it has a really good flow to it. And that's despite some of the different styles also on offer here and the different range of dynamics that the album delivers on as well. And for me, even if you prefer that older era of Soilwork, even if you prefer your Chain Heart Machines, your Steel Bar Suicides, Predator's Portrait or Natural Born Chaos, I think there's a couple of tracks here that you might just enjoy as well. So even if you are an old school Soilwork fan, I think there's something also here for you as well, which is another great thing about this album, was this, just despite it being very much embedded in the later era of Soilwork and having that more progressive, perhaps more melodic sounds than their earlier albums have, it does offer you a bit more bite and aggression, I think, in parts of this album than some of their more recent previous releases have done. So I think you might actually quite dig this album more than you would expect, which was the case with me, because after hearing a couple of the singles, I thought it's probably going to be more of a proggy, more melodic effort. So I was surprised when you got the odd track on here, which delivered some really awesome, aggressive Soilwork. Now to go into some of the tracks on this album, so you had two singles to begin with, Övergivenheten and Nous sommes la guerre. The latter kind of offered a slightly more progressive style with definitely more use of keyboards, and very well written, very well crafted song. Not one that I felt dragged despite its long running. It was almost a 7-minute track, but I felt it was pretty good. As a second track on the album, I quite liked that placement as well for this. The first track, Övergivenheten, was an enjoyable single, but I feel like that's one that, you know, it kind of felt a little bit like Soilwork I'd heard before from an album like The Ride Majestic, and then that's an album which I still respect, but not quite as keen on in their discography, so it just kind of reminds me a little bit of that style from that album. But as the album went on to tracks like Electric Again, it stepped up, and it stepped up a bit of that aggression I was talking about earlier in the video, with some fantastic Bjorn vocals as always, some really interesting guitar work, more aggression, as I say, stepped up for that track, and you get that even more so on Is It In Your Darkness, which is the track that reminds me of something that could have actually fit on Natural Born Chaos, although the track towards the end does go a little bit more in the melodic, slower tempo direction. It starts with an absolutely fantastic riff that is very reminiscent of that style of song from, as I say, a release like Natural Born Chaos. And I really, obviously, being a fan of older Soilwork albums, I totally dug that track and it was killer. Vultures also was a fantastic song, which I think demonstrates and showcases why Bjorn is such a good singer of clean vocals, you know, not just his harsh stuff. He is an amazing clean singer. Really kind of belting out the big choruses here, holding down those notes with so much power, so much passion. And you get that in other tracks on this album as well. I think you get it on Dreams of Nowhere, one of the other singles, I believe, that came out a bit later before the album release. And there's some really wonderful moments from Bjorn Strid throughout this album where his choruses actually lift the album up a little bit. And it was an interesting thing I read prior to listening to this album, was that there was a bit of a contrast in moods in the band. So Bjorn Strid was saying he's in quite a good place. Well, he's in a good place when they were recording this album or producing this album, whilst David Andersson wasn't in such a good place. He was in apparently quite a dark place when they were producing this. So I think you can hear that contrast in moods at times in this album. There are some very dark but beautiful melodic tracks, yet you get some more uplifting moments, which again serves to empower this album even more, because you don't have just one flavour throughout the entire album. It has a little bit of a range of moods and tempos as well to go with that. So it delivers on a lot of levels. Now, there are a couple of tracks which I maybe found a little bit lackluster for me personally. I think Baby, that first single, like I say, Övergivenheten, a lot of people love that track, and I totally get that. For me, it just wasn't quite for me. That's that particular opening track. And I think it was the fourth track as well I wasn't quite as keen on. But otherwise, this album really is a very, very strong album from Soilwork for me. And there were a couple of other really great songs. I haven't even mentioned quite a few of them. And the other thing I liked about this as well was the short instrumental tracks served to enhance the album too. And I liked the way in particular that track Everlasting Flame that came after Dreams of Nowhere kind of echoed the melody a bit from the track before. So it just felt like a beautiful add-on, enhancing the song, or the song before, and the album as a whole once again. So again, another strong point of this album. Golgotha and Harvest Spine I loved, and I quite liked the last track as well, even though it was another longer one. I still quite enjoyed that track too. Like, it had quite a different sort of phases of it that were just about, kept me interested. So as a whole, this album, I think I am very, very close to revealing one of my 9s out of 10s, but I'm going to give it an 8.5 for now, because it was just a little bit, for me. I felt, there was just a few moments on here that I didn't quite dig as much. As I say, a couple of tracks didn't quite like as much, and maybe I would have enjoyed even more of some of those more sort of fast tempo moments maybe. But that said, still a really good album, and like I say, an 8.5 is still a very, very high score. And I think, as I say, this is probably my favourite album from them since The Living Infinite. So what did you think of this Soilwork album, guys? Do drop in the comments what your feelings and thoughts on this one were. What were your favourite tracks? Otherwise, from me, just a reminder, actually, there will be a Soilwork tier list coming up. I did do a ranking on the channel as one of my first ever videos on this channel all that time back, 2020 or early 2021, I think. But it's going to be a tier list just to do something a little bit different with this album included. But because I feel I need a bit more time with this album still, I will do that probably in a week or two's time. So something to look forward to, I guess. Otherwise, from me, take care, everybody. Don't forget to drop that like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. We like album reviews, rankings, list videos, sci-fi, fantasy and horror content as well sometimes. Otherwise, from me, take care, everybody, and bye for now.